Hello, can you hear me? Looks like it. Fantastic. Great to be here. Thanks so much for spending some of your precious slush time with me. I want to start with some crowd work. I see everyone's running around, but maybe I can still get some engagement this way. If people are able to raise their hand, can you raise your hand if you are currently responsible for someone at your day job? You are someone who reports to you, someone on your team you're responsible for. Fantastic, fantastic. For those of you who don't, just think of people who you work with, someone on your team instead. I want you to think about the star on that team. The people who you work with, the one that stands out. If you have to stack rank, who would be at the very top of that list that you just couldn't live without? We all envision the person we're thinking of. And now I want you to imagine that right after we wrap up here, they call you and they let you know that they quit. They're leaving your team effective immediately. I'm willing to bet that that would be one of the worst phone calls you could get, at least related to your job. Maybe worse than a customer churning and going to a competitor, and maybe worse than learning that your app has been down all afternoon. And I think that is because few ingredients matter as much in a company as the people that you have on your team. It's probably the single most component that you can control. And there's a quote from Vinod Khosla who I think captures this really well, which is that the team you build is the company you build. And that's the topic that I hope to talk to you all about here today. My name is Jacob, and for the past 5 years, I've obsessed over this specific topic at Ramp. Ramp is a New York-based fintech company. We build software and payments that automates all of your company's finances. All the things that we build, our corporate card, our expense management platform, our agents that automate your tedious finance work, they're all designed to save you and your team your two most valuable resources: your team's time and your shareholders' capital, so that your company can be more successful. My hope here today is that some of the things that we can share of our learnings scaling the people at Ramp can help you and your company be more successful as well. You might wonder why you should listen to me. I didn't start the company. What do I have to say about this? And I think that's a fair question. But what I picked up from my few days here in Helsinki is that the level of ambition of founders and builders here, it's higher than it ever has been. Many companies are trying to grow at an incredibly high rate, trying to change large industries all over the world. And at Ramp, we've been fortunate to grow very quickly. We've been able to do quite a few of those things over the past 5 years. Just to put some numbers to it, 5 years ago, I joined as the 42nd employee at a company that was serving a few hundred customers with a few $1 million of annualized recurring revenue. Today, I have more than 1,400 colleagues. We serve more than 50,000 customers, and our annualized revenue exceeds $1 billion. So if you're trying to grow at a rate approaching that, I hope that some of the learnings we have from growing our people at that rate can be of help to you too. I'm going to share 4 learnings here today. 2 are from the world of hiring, recruiting, bringing people into your team, and 2 are from the world of leading teams. Once they're at the company, what do you do to get the most out of that brilliant team you've assembled? We're going to start with learning number 1. Founders should be recruiters forever. In the early days, this is kind of a non-statement. Founders have to be recruiters. There's no one else to do the job. But as you professionalize, as you scale, they tend to take a small step back. Maybe they outsource it to outside help or someone on the team. I'm not saying that you shouldn't get help, but there are many things that only founders can do, and I would encourage you to keep your founders, or if you are the founder, to stay in that seat for as long as you can. A few examples of things that I think founders are uniquely equipped to do. First, it's selling the vision of the company. As much as you train someone else, you will probably be the most compelling storyteller when it comes to sharing the company's story and this amazing future that you're trying to build together. A second thing founders are uniquely good at is placing bets on people. Typical hiring managers are more likely to go a conservative route, hire a known quantity, sort of a typical profile, which can be great sometimes, but you will also benefit from hiring some more diamond in the rough type folks who might not know exactly how they're going to deliver. And founders tend to be good at spotting those people and have the mandate to actually place that bet. Third thing that founders are uniquely equipped to do is insist on where you put the talent bar. What's the standard you want to hold people to? And will you keep that over time? You can implement this in any number of ways, but the way that we've gone about doing it at Ramp is that every single candidate before they get an offer is reviewed and given a thumbs up by either our founders or a leader of that team. Every single candidate is reviewed by our founders or the leader of that team. This allows us to do all the things that I just mentioned. It gives our founders an opportunity to see where do we keep that talent bar? Are we holding it high enough, or are we actually letting it slip? Are we placing enough bets, or are we just hiring known quantities that look like a conventional profile? And if there's a fantastic candidate who we're about to give an offer to, is it someone they should spend time with, share their vision of what the world might look like if the company is successful? All right, that was learning number 1. Learning number 2 on hiring is that you should start small. If you are able to convince a new hire to start with a smaller role, I think that will benefit both them and the company. Let me unpack that a bit. I'm not saying you should be cheap on compensation or something like that, but I'm saying if you can start smaller on the scope and on the title, that might just help them in the long run. The first reason for that is it's a really effective filter. People who obsess over titles and scope on day one tend to be focused on the wrong things, and you might not want those people at your company. So it's a great thing if you can filter them out early. A second, and perhaps a bit more interesting of a reason, is if you reduce the scope early on, you might actually be able to increase the odds that the person is successful in the long run at the company. I don't want to give myself too much credit, but that's almost a profound statement. It is very, very difficult to increase the odds that someone is successful at your company. There are very few interventions that you can make that tip the odds in your favor. Let me explain why I think that is. I think that first and foremost, humans are very receptive to first impressions. And so how well you do in your first couple of months will follow you for your entire time at a company. And if you limit the scope to a smaller area, you can focus more of your time and energy just on that area. It is much more likely that you will do a great job focused on a smaller area than if you're trying to do too many things at once. Put those two things together, and if you're able to pull this off, your new hire will have the best months, the best quarter that anyone on that team has ever had because they're just focused on that small thing. They will leave the best first impression they possibly could. And that reputation, the followership from the people that they are surrounded by, the energy and momentum in the company, those are things you can't get anywhere else. And that will propel them forward into the future in a way that will set them up for success when they take on that additional scope. We pushed on this quite hard at Ramp. I took a look at our stats before this talk, and 60% of our most senior leaders, more than half, started in a smaller role than the one that they are in today. And we gradually expanded that. So they had that initial success, left that great first impression, and were able to grow from there. We are now in the world of leading. We have left the world of hiring. You built your team. Now what do you do once you have the people here? Learning number 3 is to create the right incentives. Learning number 3, to create the right incentives. You have everyone here, and your job now is to get people to row in the same direction, and hopefully row as quickly as possible. The incentives that you set, they'll either help you a great deal with this, or they might just hurt you. And I'm not here to argue about what kind of behavior you should incentivize. Different companies have different approaches to these things. Some companies want to be product-oriented, some want to be really customer-oriented. You kind of have to make that up on your own. But my point is that you should reinforce whatever behavior you want to incentivize very deliberately. And the tool that we have found maybe the most effective for this is promotions. Who do you promote in the organization, and why do you promote them? I'll unpack a bit of why I think this works, and then also how you can go about implementing them. On the why side, promotions might feel a bit tacky, or almost like not the right thing to focus on. But I think a promotion has something for basically anyone on your team. If someone is financially motivated, there's usually some compensation change associated. If they care more about status or recognition, a title might go a really long way for them. Or if they are the idealistic employee, maybe they only care about learning. And a promotion still gets them an opportunity to work on new, different, maybe more things that will be exciting for them. And so every employee, I would think, regardless of their interest, will have something in there that they actually care about. Every employee will care about it to some extent. The second thing about promotions that makes it a helpful tool is that it's a direct response from the company. It's totally in the company's control. It's not that you want a deal depending on what happened to the customer. It's not based on luck. It's just based on what the company decides to do. And your smart employees will understand that this is something that you decided to do in response to something else. The third thing about promotions that makes them very helpful as a tool to reinforce incentives is that they are visible to the entire team. So you're not only reinforcing something with the individual who is getting that recognition, but you're actually broadcasting a signal to the entire team who work with this person. They know how they behave, they know how they operate. And you're basically broadcasting that this is the behavior that we want to endorse. You can use that to your benefit, or it can slow you down. In terms of how to implement this, I think the first step is simply to acknowledge that you are sending signals to the company when you are promoting folks. When we do this at Ramp, we of course talk about the impact that someone's having on the business, the skills that they are picking up, but we also talk very explicitly about the signal that we send to the company. It can be surprisingly clarifying to ask the question, if we promote this person and everyone starts behaving just like they do, is that a good thing? Do we want more of them? Quite often, we find that the answer is yes, and we think that we benefit from promoting this person and sending that signal. But every once in a while, it makes us stop and think about if we want more of this behavior in the company. The final thing I'll say on promotions is that the industry standards on this are surprisingly bad. And so if you don't take deliberate action on it, you risk drifting into how the rest of the world works, which I think is a very bad thing for fast-growing companies. Just two quick examples from what at least used to be the case at larger companies. I think it's gotten better. But a common criteria at a large company is that you can only get promoted if you have a team of a certain size. What does that incentivize? Hiring a bunch of people that you don't need. Not what you want for the company. Or perhaps it might say that in order to get promoted, you have to have been in this job for 3 years, which incentivizes waiting for 3 years. Also not a great thing for a company that's trying to do a lot in a small amount of time. We've taken this very seriously at Ramp, and a stat that I think is a good testament to this is the fact that 50% of our managers started at the company as individual contributors. And so these were people who started at the company, were able to operate the way that we think most benefits the company and our customers and our shareholders. And time again, we're given the opportunity to take on more responsibility. That reinforced the behavior that we want to see, that we think benefits us, not only with them as individuals, but with everyone else on their team. And I think you too can use this tool to reinforce those things. Fourth and last learning is that you should run to your fires. If you think that you have a problem, the odds are that you have a problem, and you should run towards that problem as quickly as possible. The way you solve that problem, it could look different depending on the situation. In some cases, it might just mean giving someone feedback. In some cases, it might mean that you have to change their role or their responsibilities in some way. And in some cases, it does mean that you have to part ways with someone. This is not the most fun one to end on. It feels a bit gloomy, a bit depressing for the end of a fun conference to talk about how you have to run to your fires. And so I was really keen to not talk about it, but I found it very difficult to go up here on stage and with a straight face say that I'm going to share the learnings that we have and not talk about this. It would have felt irresponsible not to talk about this. That's how important I think that this is. And even though it's a cliche, even though it's something you'll see in management books at the airport tomorrow, it's still that important to talk about. So I'll try to relay why I think this is so important and see if maybe I can encourage some folks to take it a bit more seriously than they have so far. One factor about this idea that I think is important to acknowledge is that it's entirely in your control. You could literally do something about this right after we wrap up here. And so the decision not to act on it, at least to start some conversation, start some sort of process, is entirely up to you. And begs the question why we don't act on it sooner when it's entirely in our power. I think it's also underrated, despite the fact that it's pretty selfish not to act on these things. It is selfish towards the person who is currently in that job and not doing an excellent job at it. They can probably tell that they are not doing a great job. And you hired them because you thought that they had some amazing potential. They're currently not living up to it. And so every day that you're letting them stay in that role that is not the perfect fit for them, I think that is another day that is wasted for them. And so you're not doing them favors, even if it might feel like the nicer thing to wait out the clock. The other constituent or stakeholder that this is selfish towards is the rest of the team. They might actually feel this more than you do. You might not have to interact with this person all that often. But if you've hired a team of brilliant people who want to do, solve difficult problems together, one of the things they probably care a lot about is who they work with. They want to learn from the people they work with, and they want to get over these difficult challenges together. They have to work with this person every day, even if they're not doing an amazing job. And so the failure to act is selfish, not only towards the person in the role, but also the rest of the company. Again, not the most fun one to end on, but I think it is so important, and the human nature, the urge to avoid it, to put our heads in the sand, is so strong that I think this bears repeating and has to be included on a list of this kind. Those were the 4 learnings that I had to share with you all today. To recap real quick, we had the first one, that founders should be recruiters forever. The second, that you should start small. Third, that you should create the right incentives. And fourth, you should run towards your fires. Again, it's been incredibly energizing to meet so many ambitious builders and founders and operators here today. I hope that some of the learnings that we picked up from scaling people at Ramp can be of help as you try to grow just as quickly as we did. Thank you.